what is the placebo effect? Would you have to define it and help us understand it?
Yeah, so I mean, look, the placebo effect's been defined in kind of various ways. I guess the placebo effect, like, I guess the best definition is it's a positive treatment outcome that is attributable to the psychosocial context surrounding a treatment rather than the specific components of the treatment itself. So that is all the things that are inside you and outside you um, combine to make you believe that these are the things that make you believe that you're receiving a treatment. They're the things that lead to real physiological and psychological benefits, even if the treatment has no therapeutic effect.
What is the history of it? Has it changed much the way people have thought about it? And what is the kind of recent science on trying to understand whether sort of it is a true effect and just what is going on with it?
Yeah, look, it's really interesting, right? Like, I guess there's kind of anthropologically, there's kind of some of the earliest studies or kind of notions of placebo come from, I mean, the ancient Greeks knew about it, I think, or Romans or one of those ancient groups. No, probably it'd be the Romans, I guess, because placebo is the Latin term which means I shall please. So it's the idea of kind of something pleasing someone, and it was given in the context of all right, I've got a patient that I can't treat, that nothing's working for them. I'll give them this placebo, and they'll be happy with that, and they'll get better. So there was, I guess, this understanding that there were kind of psychological effects that people could be crazy, and something would appease them. And then I guess kind of really what we've learned is kind of since the 1940s is so during the war there was a famous military field physician called Henry Beecher, who you may have heard of. Um, so he was out on the front line. He was doing surgeries and treating a lot of soldiers who were receiving incredible trauma to their bodies and incredible pain, like missing limbs and all sorts of horrible things. And of course, when you're in the field, at the battlefield, you don't often have access to all the supplies you would necessarily want. So he um, would quite often run out of painkillers, would run out of morphine. And so he found over time that people were desperate and they're writhing in pain. And he'd inject saline into them and say, "I'm giving you a shot of morphine. You're going to start feeling better." And to his surprise, he found that a lot of them actually did feel a lot better receiving saline. So he went on, and he was one of the forefathers of the placebo research movement. He went on after the war and studied that for the rest of his career.
It's I'm wondering what is it the tension between things like we don't understand, like we just maybe like, and maybe it's a bit weird and obvious with that saline example, like just salt, it surely doesn't do anything, but like the difference between we just don't understand it, we don't understand the mechanisms, versus it's obvious that it doesn't and shouldn't do anything, but there's maybe we need to think more about things like expectations and other, and I guess maybe this is the meat of the debate about placebo, trying to discriminate between, can you isolate precise specific mechanisms versus can you, versus what, in what ways can you even say this can only be a, placebo, and it surely has no concrete benefit.
Well, so look, I guess I mean the some researchers believe that there's not one placebo effect but many. So it's a good kind of catch-all phrase to describe a phenomenon, right? Um, we know that our brains, like the main reason we have brains is that they're, I mean, aside from kind of the functions of keeping us alive, they're prediction machines. So the main benefit they confer to us is that we can we know what's happened in the past, we can understand the context that we're in now, and we can predict what's going to happen in the future. So if yesterday I burnt my hand by touching a red hot stove, today I'm going to go, oh, okay, if I touch my hand on that, it's going to burn again. Um, and there's kind of there's a they also talk about if you think about if you're outside in the yard and you're thinking about, particularly in Australia, if you're thinking about spiders, if something brushes against your skin, you'll jump because you'll naturally think, oh wow, it's a spider, but then it's just a branch. So I guess the brain has really complex ways of kind of understanding context and anticipating things and putting memories and perceptions and sensory input together. Um, so is it a
Uh,
real thing or not? I mean, I guess, yeah, to kind of, I guess, I mean, to reduce it in some ways, just to kind of this idea of a placebo effect that's not real. I mean, it is real. Like you get, they've measured it. You know, they can
mm.
measure actual physiological changes. So it is a real thing. But yeah, kind of, it's very complex to kind of boil it down, I guess, if that
It's real,
answers your
but it's
question.
yeah, but it's hard to explain why. And I like you bringing in the cognitive aspects of it. So I was recently talking to the cognitive scientists Mark Miller and Ben White, and we're discussing even as specific examples. You're in a hospital, and even if you were to be told that the doctor isn't real, that's a person dressing up in a lab coat. You're still in a hospital, and that still looks like a doctor. And so you've predicted in the past that when you're in these environments, this is an environment of getting better. People are supposed to be helping you, and so to be like people, I think even if you're told this is a placebo, it's not supposed to work. But then you have all these other environmental factors, just because there's some like propositional part of your brain that's like, oh, I know it's not supposed to work. What does that mean to know? Your body and everything and deeper parts of yourself are like, well, this, that example of like you're in World War II in the fields, and like this doctor, you trust them, and so you're expecting suddenly to have pain reductions, and so in a way they're kind of starting to make some sense and some grounds to sort of how and why it could work. Mm,
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And the treatment context is so, particularly, yeah, the external treatment context is so important. Like there are some really important, really interesting studies that have been looked at, open versus hidden administration of drugs. So they can give a patient, they can they can have a machine that will deliver a dose of painkiller, and they can say to the patient, "This is going to deliver painkiller to you, every so often, and it'll have an effect." So the best is when a clinician comes and gives you the dose directly. Then there's the machine. If they hide the machine and don't tell you about it, the pain reduction is actually not that great. So it's
mm.
that interaction of, I mean, painkillers. I'm not here to tell anyone that painkillers don't work. They absolutely do, but they interact with that psychological stuff, right? And how they interact. I mean, that's something that the researchers are still figuring out.
And I mean, and one thing I kind of wanted to touch on is that it's we like in our modern like Western medicine that there's a specific drug and it has its specific mechanisms and specific effects, um, but like if you increasingly you can't isolate things doesn't mean it's not useful. And I think you've like looked at things like, or you sent me some stuff about psychotherapy at least, and okay, we are fields dedicated to helping people, and people do have improvements in many different kinds and forms of psychotherapy. And but people's own problems, and then they're idiosyncratic, and so but just because it's a situated thing in relation to you and your specific practitioner doesn't mean that it's not helping you, and but just because we can't sort of isolate and zone in on the specific mechanisms doesn't mean we should say it's not real or it doesn't work.
Well, and this is the thing, right? Like psychotherapy, it works. People go to psychotherapy and they get benefits. But I guess we've kind of we live in this Western medical model where, and don't get me wrong either, Western medicine's brought us some beautiful things, and the scientific method, the scientific method, placebo controlled us, randomized controlled trials, fabulous, fabulous tool. Like I wouldn't trade the world we live in for anything. Um, but one of the issues with it is that we tend to see everything through that biomedical kind of model. So we tend to think of everything, and look, the placebo controlled trials work great in the medical model, right? So we have an active, we have a drug which has a specific effect that has active ingredients in it that do something to our body. And then, of course, there's the placebo effect, which we can't get rid of, and we never will, because, like, how can you? It's like the context is everywhere. You don't take a drug in a vacuum, right?
Mm.
So the context is always going to be there. So if you get a pill that looks exactly like the drug, but is inert to those active ingredients, you give that, and whatever effect comes out of that is the placebo, well, what we would call a placebo effect. There's a lot of other stuff that can go into it. I mean, it's a series of things, but basically any effect that is psychological. So any psychological effects of the drug, and they tend to be quite a lot larger than the biological effects of the drug. So basically, when
Mm,
you compare the active drug to the placebo, you've got the psychological components, which are controlled for by the placebo, and then you've got the active components, and that gives you
right.
the efficacy, right? So, I mean, there's this thing called the efficacy paradox, where some people say, all right, well, treatment A has an efficacy of 2 and treatment B has an efficacy of 5. Therefore, treatment 2 must be the best one, right? But if you don't look at the effectiveness, how it works with the placebo effect, it might be that um, the first treatment is actually more effective overall when you include the placebo effect. So
Mm.
yeah, it's really, yeah, it kind of, it doesn't do us any favors in many ways to just consider efficacy and kind of consider the placebo as a nuisance, because it's everywhere.
Interesting. So it then seems to me like an increasing paradigm might have to be that you consider both. So you try and actually measure both, and you say, definitely these active ingredients are doing something. But placebo too, and just and maybe that term will sort of become maybe more nuanced and just try and think about, okay, well, let's maybe we can explain these things with cognitive science and like try and understand more about beliefs and the kind of mechanisms there, and maybe it will become clearer. It's interesting, because you think about maybe like ancient medicine practices or things that kind of seem pseudoscientific, and they're not going to work, and it's like, on the one hand, I mean, a lot of the time modern medicine does have like lower death rates and things, so it does seem to work, but like you can imagine, given in light of placebo work, that actually treatments that, like, there's no active thing that it's obviously gonna help you. Actually, you can imagine that now your family and things, they're gonna start caring for you, and you're having the expectation, and you're in a zone. Okay, this is a time of recuperation. I mean, I study economics, and even I do like even people thinking about it as, it's almost like someone is committing to you. It's like they're saying, I'm going to be putting resources towards you, right? And so that's like a mental signal that's like, oh, okay, my family is now caring for me. That should be a sign to my body, like, okay, well, like that's going to be helpful for me, and that should genuinely be a gain. So I mean, do you have anything to say about thinking about ancient sort of medicine practices in light of this?
I mean, I think ancient practices were very ritualistic. So you had you know um, medicine men and shaman and kind of people that had often elaborate dress and a lot of contextual cues. And they were very well respected. Well, had a lot of gravitas. Very very esteemed in their communities. And
Uh,
it was largely that kind of relationship, right? So it's that so there's a close cousin of the placebo effect is something called common factors effect. So this comes into play with psychological psychotherapies. So it's believed that there's you get a placebo effect from a treatment. There's a specific effect, but there's also common factors effects, which are things that are common to all treatment contexts, basically. So you've got a therapist, you've got some sort of goal or treatment rationale. So you've got things like this that are fairly common. So I guess in these ancient times, yeah, I mean, they must have realized that these things were really, really powerful. And yeah, the ceremony that went around the medicine man, or hopefully there were medicine women in those days as well, um, were, yeah, it was really important, and people
mm,
associated that with healing, and that really helped. And they may have had some medicines as well, whether they worked as effectively as the stuff we have now. Who
mm.
knows?
I mean, there is one there's tension here in that, like, if you look at some like medicines in the Amazon, and just the knowledge that people accumulate over the years, actually there are some plants and things that we don't even realize. Oh wait, like we thought we don't understand, but then you later on actually realize the active ingredient. So that actually is something to consider. But then, yeah, I think John Vervaeke, the cognitive scientist, has some great work on ritual, and how you shouldn't ignore it, because you think about like anything you do in life. Do you just like do is an important activity to you? Like, is it you do exactly the same things as just any other thing? You're making a morning coffee? No, I mean there are things leading up to it, and it's like it's there are mini celebrations and everything in life, and so the symbolic aspects, these aren't just sort of things that are kind of useless additions, right? When a shaman, a medicine, a healer in ancient times is sort of dressing up, and there's like a ceremony around wanting to heal you, um, like good cognitive science and how that could genuinely influence your expectations, beliefs, and sort of help deep systems in your body sort of consider how that could help you. Um, it's a
So yeah, so here's a bit of food for thought that kind of relates to that. So they've actually done studies where, so in some psychotherapy settings, they have like a psychotherapist who will prescribe a drug or deliver a drug. So it'll be some sort of psychoactive drug for anxiety or depression or whatever. Um, excuse me, I can't remember exactly what the drug was off the top of my head. But they did this study where they had a range of different psychotherapists delivering either a drug which they knew was working, it had active ingredients and it worked, and they also had the same or other psychotherapists who were delivering a placebo. So they were doing a placebo control trial, trying to see whether this drug worked. Surprisingly, what they found was that the skill of the therapist in delivering the treatment was actually bigger than the effect of the drug. So they found that a really highly skilled therapist could deliver the placebo more effectively than like a much less skilled therapist could deliver the active drug. So that shows you how powerful the therapeutic relationship and that ritual is. The skills that go around that are not to be understated.
Yeah, and me and a friend were actually talking about something similar, which is like on this point of, you could say, are they just is it just faking it? Could you not get someone like a really good fake actor to be a doctor then? But you know, you think about why anyone we know, like someone that's like maybe a student like me and has never done any proper research or anything. If I say something, it's not going to be as of great importance as a researcher that's done years of work on something, even if we say the same thing. And why should it? If someone has done years of work, years of training, then you should put more weight to what they're saying, because even if on the surface I'm right, what are my presuppositions and things? And so if a doctor is delivering something to you, I can imagine that in some real sense you can kind of perceive they have this expertise, and maybe if they're even unforeseen circumstances, other things, like they'll be there to help you. So I could even imagine how there's kind of genuine real effects there. um on this, so you've done a lot of work on meditation and the placebo effect and just the science of trying to understand how and why meditation works and what it does. So it'd be interesting to explore that now. What have you found there?
Yeah, so look, I was really interested in this idea of, again, kind of coming back to the biomedical model and the Western medical model. So, I mean, we know meditation and particularly mindfulness is quite effective. It's very popular. It's everywhere, and it's used for a lot of different things. And it's shown a lot of benefits across mental health and well-being, even some physical health kind of symptoms as well. So very, very useful technique. And of course, everyone wants to know, okay, well, how does it work? What are the mechanisms? How does it work? So a lot of the studies that have been done to date in the meditation field, so the methodology, the enthusiasm outpaced the methodology in the beginning. So a lot of people were really excited about this idea of, okay, well, meditation can be a medicine and a treatment for us. So some of the methodologies weren't that great in the old days. They're getting a lot better now, but basically one of the things that's consistently been shown, so we now have thousands of studies of meditation across different kind of for different kind of health applications, and there are lots of meta-analyses, so studies where someone takes the results from all the studies, puts them in a big pot, and analyzes them and tries to understand if there's a signal across all those studies. One of the things that's been found is that when meditation is compared against passive control group, so that is something like a no treatment control group or a waitlist control or something where people don't do anything, they don't receive any treatment. It's a very large effect. If you compare it against an active control, or some sort of other treatment, something like psychoeducation or listening to an audio book or something like that, the effect gets a little bit smaller, so the efficacy gets a little bit smaller. And basically, it continues like that. So if you get a really specific active control, the effect gets smaller. So basically, what it's saying is that the closer the control condition is to the meditation itself, the smaller the effect of the meditation. And that's really strongly suggesting the possibility that there could be placebo effects. But not many people had kind of looked at this question. There'd been a handful of studies that had looked at specific active controls or sham, as they're called, placebo controls or sham controls for meditation. But that all had kind of various deficits. So no one had actually fully characterized a placebo effect. There was really strong suggestion that a placebo effect would be there, but no one had actually properly characterized it and said, here's the smoking gun. This is the placebo effect.
Mm.
So I guess my interest at that stage was to understand the mechanisms, and I thought, well, if I can develop a really good placebo control, I can use that. I can control for the placebo effect, and then whatever's left over will be the specific effect of meditation. Sounds all really quite simple. So that's what I set out to do basically. And yeah, so I did a series of studies to look at that. And yeah, it was a little bit disappointing what I found. I actually found that well, first of all, I found a placebo effect, so that was great. But the specific effect was a little bit harder to isolate. So yeah, lots of reasons why that could be. It could be the type of meditation, the fact that it was novices, but very interesting finding that what I thought there would be quite a strong specific effect, and in fact it was a lot weaker than I
Mm.
thought it would be. So
Yeah, and it's interesting because sort of the IA talked a little bit about the problem of I mean, one, people are novices, right? So how do we kind of, is that changing our results? It's meditation is like difficult to learn and things, and so it's not obvious that there's like some linear effect of it's that it could even work with novices. Um, yeah. Also, in talking to like Toby Woods, another meditation researcher, there's so many different kinds of meditation. So I guess that's also like a concern of like maybe even as well like there'll be some that are easier for novices to take up, and others that they not that they're not useful, but just that like it's like with anything, you might not only be able to learn it at a more advanced stage, but then it has great benefits. So would you have to say anything about this?
yeah, look, I think look, the practice that we used was a practice for novices. So basically, there's kind of two stages. This was mindfulness meditation, and it was trying to understand. So the first thing you need to do when you start training is to build attentional stability. So the mindfulness is paying attention to things that are coming up in your body on a moment to moment basis, and then you apply some kind of mindfulness qualities to that awareness. So things like non-judgment, non-reacting, acceptance, and openness to the experience. Um, so obviously you can't kind of apply those kind of metacognitive um, kind of processes to your awareness if you don't have awareness to start with. So we started with an awareness practice. So it was largely building kind of stability of attention or anchoring attention to the body. So it's possible. There's some evidence in the literature to say that kind of isn't the active ingredient. So there's kind of a lot of ways that might not be kind of what mindfulness is, but obviously that's kind of the first step that you need to build on. So that's a possibility. One of the other things we've found in some of the work that I'm doing, so I'm now a postdoctoral fellow working for the Contemplative Studies Centre at the University of Melbourne. We're doing some more work there around dose response kind of relationships between things. So trying to work out kind of how much of which practice is needed for what sort of benefit. And we find that benefits tend to be quite quick across a lot of practices, but a lot of them the benefits depend on what people are motivated for. So,
Mm.
people tend to be motivated by some sort of mundane sort of thing like, oh, I want relief from my headache, or I want to, be a little bit less stressed. But then kind of motivations can change over time. Research participants, it's often hard to know how motivated they are for the outcome. So there's also that aspect of things. Um, yeah, so there
It's
are a few considerations there. Yeah.
it's interesting because like on like, again you it comes to the point of trying to find the active ingredient, right? And maybe there is a primary one, but like they all kind of interact as well. So it's hard to separate. And yes, especially with something like mindfulness, it's even less than psychotherapy when you're with someone like it's kind of has to kind of be intrinsically motivating, and like the difficulty of, let's say, even like simply like trying to focus on your breath or something, just not be distracted. It's like, well, it's easy to just that takes a lot of effort. So um you know it's easy to just give up on that. So yeah, it's a kind of difficulties there. And I I wonder, you talked as well about people who have, like, monks or people have done it for years and years. What are the kind of results there? Like how do we can we measure it, like what, and find things there? And what are the kind of ways we can scientifically study those people?
Look, there are some kind of case-controlled studies. So there's studies where obviously you can't randomize people to being a monk for a lifetime, or not, or you can't randomize them to go to the placebo monastery. That's quite unethical. So yeah, so they have to basically select monks that have been doing it for a long time, and then they've got to control for them somehow, and they tend to use like a case match control. So what they would do is they'd find a monk and then find, so this one's a 73-year-old male and he's from Tibet and he doesn't speak English. So they'll find a 73-year-old male from Tibet who doesn't speak English, who doesn't meditate, and they'll use him as the comparison basically. So they've done
Mm.
studies like this. There are huge differences, so really, really pronounced differences in their kind of outcomes, like both kind of self-report outcomes on like their survey responses, and also kind of brain scans. Their neural activity is quite different, and physiological measures as well. So stress reactivity is a lot lower. Pain response is a lot lower. They're able to kind of dissociate pain, so they can tolerate really high pain, and not kind of be, feel it as being unpleasant. They know it's really intense, of course, but they can kind of dissociate from the unpleasantness of it, and they can tolerate it a lot more. Um, so those studies have been really good, and kind of, what we might expect if people were to continue for a long time. One of the problems with them though is that they have a lot of self-selection bias in them. So it not many people dedicate their lifetimes to living in a monastery and meditating. So that makes them quite different in a lot of ways to most people in the population. So it kind of makes it a little bit harder to compare, um, which is why we really need to start focusing more on some kind of progression experiences work. And we're doing some of that at the centre as well. We're doing some longer term follow-ups with meditators to try and understand, how things change over time.
Interesting. um I wonder, what do you think of, like, even like, if you have like sham placebo controls that, like, they don't do anything, like why they work? Is it kind of like this, it's you see, as they get more similar to meditation, so maybe it's like, maybe does that help us tell us a bit about the benefits of meditation? Is part of it like dedicating time and just, even having some time that you're not doing something else? And like, we in our modern environment, we're constantly doing things, and like, so that in that way it's actually not negligible that you spend some time doing something that's, even if it doesn't have like some, it's not actively prescribed as a meditation that we would acknowledge, so yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, look, the sham that we used actually was very effective. Like it was quite surprising. So yeah, we were getting medium effect sizes on pain, like massive, massive reductions in pain, reductions in anxiety, stress, depression. A lot of mechanisms were changing as well. Like it was really effective. And so we were kind of thinking, oh, is it active? Is it actually active? And we looked at it, and it wasn't. Like it was some of the. We looked at the mechanisms, and and the mechanisms weren't activating, the mindfulness specific ones weren't activating. So it definitely wasn't mindfulness. But it was just, yeah, it was fascinating. Like, it's really, really powerful. So I guess the thing is, like, so going back to the biomedical model, like, if I was doing a drug study of an analgesic, like a painkiller, I can make a sugar pill, and I know the sugar pill is just sugar and it has nothing in it. Really easy to do, and but like, how do you do? What's the sugar pill equivalent of meditation? So basically, that's where the lines get quite blurry, right? Because, okay,
Mm.
so if we assume the active ingredients are building attentional stability through the meditation, and then applying mindful qualities to that attention. If you take those as the two active ingredients and strip them out, I mean, you still have a meditation. You're still sitting down. You're still relaxed. You're still not doing your phones in your bag. Your phone's away. It's turned off. You've got 20 minutes just to chill out and relax. You've got a nice voice telling you what to do. They're not telling you anything particularly useful to do, but it's a nice relaxing 20-minute break. Like, people love the sham meditation. Um, it
Yeah.
definitely wasn't. There's no question that it was not mindfulness. It definitely wasn't mindfulness, but it was still incredibly beneficial.
Mm.
And so that comes back to that context, right? Like, it's that, you know you've got someone that's delivering something that you think, well, they're delivering something that's relaxing, it's calming, it's a lovely thing to do. And you're also being told through the study and by the instructor that this is mindfulness, and oh, mindfulness. I've heard about that everywhere, and everyone does mindfulness, and mindfulness is great, and all these things are just making you feel awesome. So, so yeah, it's a really tricky thing when you deal with psychological things, particularly. Like, it's just what is active and what's inactive. Like, it's all leading to an effect, right?
It's also interesting that when we're studying meditation, we, maybe as scientists studying it, we'll look at like specific benefits. Did anxiety improve? Did pain response and things improve? And I just wonder, as well, it's because that is then kind of prescribing what we think meditation should do. But it's kind of interesting. I think about people like Sam Harris, who might argue like that's fine. Those are great things about meditation, but like for him, meditation is no. It's about realizing the how there's almost a lack of self, a lack of free will, and we don't need to get into the philosophy of whether that's true or not. But like it's or that the arbitrariness of your internal voice and things like this. So do you have anything to say about that? Like this tension of, on like we can say, or these are the things we want to happen, but that's a kind of one way of thinking about meditation.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really interesting point. So, now that meditation has been around for millennia, right? And it's been used as a spiritual path for a long time, and people consider it not just a lifelong pursuit; it's a multiple lifetime pursuit. Like, I'll meditate all this lifetime. I won't be enlightened by the end of it, but I'll be reborn into a favorable rebirth, and I'll just keep working at it until I'm finally liberated and I can leave the cycle of birth and rebirth. Yeah, I mean, that's cool. um, it has lots of side effects. Like, I think that was its initial purpose. Um, And then, of course, in the Western context, John Kabat-Zinn kind of created mindfulness-based stress reduction in the late 70s because he was working in a hospital and he saw a lot of people with chronic illnesses that Western medicine couldn't fix. It's like, oh, but he was a Zen practitioner and he knew meditation could help these things. It's like, oh, wow, what can I do for these people? So he kind of created this 8-week program, called it, he de-emphasized the meditation. He said it's mindfulness-based stress reduction, and all these people saw lots of benefits, right? And that's kind of just triggered this idea that, okay, look, it's beneficial for this and that and the other thing, so we can just use it as a treatment for this. But people in the Western context, like, it does work if you put in the effort. But I guess the Western context kind of teaches us that there's something we can be given that will fix us, right? And so it's it's quite different. Like, if in a traditional sense, like, first of all, you wouldn't be doing it for your anxiety. You'd be doing it to escape the cycle of birth and rebirth. Um, but also, it's like, wow, I've got this opportunity to do this. I'm gonna give it my all. Like, I'm gonna put into this, and I'm gonna get the benefits. So it's not like I'm gonna sit back and someone's gonna meditate for me. It just didn't work that way. So yeah, it's that sense. Yeah, the idea that it's kind of a treatment. Like, I think it works, but it works for a lot of people. But I think, again, there's kind of those personal factors, like, how committed am I to actually doing it? These things make a big difference.
Mm. I know, and might be a trivial point, but even me and my friends talk about just when you're so busy, like, or studying or working or whatever, like you actually might not even give yourself like 15 minutes to just think. And I know that's like meditation in a way is the point of going beyond that, but that is actually super helpful. Even like going for walks and just like not having any stimulus. Even these can be kind of beneficial, and so it's also like kind of have to look at the context of people's lives too, and so that might be interesting. Like, are they having times in the day where they can think, and but maybe they're not meditating. It's interesting. I
Yeah, and I mean,
Go
look,
on.
there are different meditations too, right? Like, some meditations are very relaxing and are really good for that, like, just to be able to shut off your mind and relax. But you can do that. There are much easier ways to do that sometimes than through meditation, right? Like, you can watch TV, and
Mm,
that's a really good way to suck your attention into something. Um, Whereas, like, things like mindfulness are actually, they can be relaxing at times, but they can also be quite unpleasant and quite effortful. Like, they're but the trade off, the benefit for putting in the effort and going through that discomfort and that effort is you get enhanced attention. So in your moment to moment experience later, you can see how you're reacting to things, and you can change your behavior, and
mm.
and that leads to benefits as well.
And I doubt this has been studied, but like I even think about things like flow states you get into in like sports or just other, maybe even video games. I'd have to think more about that. But like you're just doing an activity and you're not like thinking about really anything else, and you're just able to like use the machinery of your body and your mind to do things, and that can be like super, like even afterwards I can get into like a state where it feels, there's a lot of mental clarity, and that feels great. And could you like separate out the physical benefits or whatever from that? And even, I wonder, because yeah, flow states are really interesting, and the it's very easy to kind of be caught up in your own head, and like you're trying to, a modern world is kind of strangely complicated, and it's like in some ways more comfortable and easier, but in other ways it's a bit annoying, and you're responding to whatever emails, or like doing kind of annoying task on like some computer programming, like, why is this not working? In some ways, even if it's more arduous in the past, like there's a way in which, I don't know, I might be idolizing things, but it's interesting to consider that.
No, no. I mean, flow states are a beautiful thing, right? And it's just like they're when your mind and your body are as one. Like, there's no separation between them, and that's a really beautiful place to be, right? Because
Mm.
so often we're sitting up here and we're just thinking about our body. And I'm like, oh, I'm hungry, or my thumbs hurt because I've been playing too many video games, or whatever it is, right? But when you're just in that state where your mind and your body are just working in perfect unity, it's what it's all about. And I guess that meditation gets to that. It doesn't. Yeah, I mean, you can get into flow states in meditation, but also the meditation itself can make you feel more embodied. So it's more like your mind and your body are one. Not necessarily in a flow state kind of way. It's a bit more mundane than that, but definitely it can also have a lot of parallels to flow states in that way.
What do you think of the ethics of placebo? If we like kind of can appreciate that it is like a real thing. Like I was reading that, imagine you have someone who, like the doctor themselves, like they don't realize that it doesn't, you can't do anything, but they kind of trick themselves. Like, is there like a ways in which kind of just have everyone just believing that things work? Is there a way to think about like what might go from here and the future of appreciating these kinds of effects?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a big movement called the open label placebo movement, So there's been quite a bit of research into open label placebo. So the open label placebo is basically when you give someone a placebo, but you tell them it's a placebo.
Mm.
So one of the main ethical issues, of course, with placebos is that you can't knowingly give someone a treatment that doesn't work because they're expecting that they're getting something that will work and it could cause them harm. Um, so you can get around that, of course, by with open label placebos, and some people will refuse them. But like there's a fascinating study on open label placebos for irritable bowel syndrome, quite famous, done by the Harvard group. And yeah, it was a really interesting study. They basically took people with really severe irritable bowel syndrome and they put them on a clinical trial, and they said, look, we're going to give you this sugar pill, this placebo treatment. It's effectively a sugar pill, but we believe it's going to work through mind-body processes. And people were like, all right, whatever. And they took the pills, and their symptoms got better. To the point where, when the trial finished, and they stopped and they ran out of pills, their symptoms came back. And a lot of the patients were going back to the research team and saying, can I have some more placebo pills? They're really effective. So I mean, it works, and again, it's the treatment ritual, the context that goes around it, the ritual of taking the pills, the belief, and the hope as well. I think Ted Kapchuk, who was one of the leads on that study, said a lot of people, you know, just it's that hope. They don't know that it's going to work. They've tried things before and they haven't worked, but it's that they hope, and that the hope keeps them going. So I mean, definitely like the placebo, as we've been talking about, it's really powerful, right? It's and it's in everything. It's really hard to kind of extract. Like it's impossible to extract from most treatment contexts. So I mean, we should be celebrating it. We should be maximizing it. And I think there's no reason. We need to understand the psychological stuff more and how it interacts with specific effects. But like open label placebos is a really good way, really good step in the right direction.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I don't have anything else I want to ask. And so, can I give you the last word? Do you have any comments or else? Where can people find your work and learn more about what you've done?
Yeah, so yeah, no, it's been a lovely chat. So just looking at my notes here. Um, I mean, look, mostly, yeah, I think we've covered most of the big issues. I mean, one of the things that we're getting really interested in now is, of course, um, we've gone from traditional practices where someone spends a lifetime doing meditation, and then we've reduced that to an 8-week course that you can take to get over your chronic pain or manage your stress. And of course, 8 weeks, no one's going to commit to that anymore. So we're getting these shorter and shorter interventions over time. They used to be face to face, but now, COVID's happened and Zoom's happened, and now everything's moving online. So the context is changing as well. And now, of course, since COVID particularly, we've had the explosion of meditation apps. And so we've got essentially the same practice, at its core, it's still meditation, but the context is changing. The dose is reducing, and the context is changing a lot. And so there's some of the early evidence coming out was saying that looking at mental health apps generally, like across the board mental health apps, including meditation apps, there was very very little evidence of efficacy for any of them. Um, I think that's changing a little bit. There's getting to be a bit more evidence around that, but there's a lot of things we just don't understand. Like we don't understand. Yeah, we might understand. Okay, I can do a 3-minute practice on a meditation app, and I can do that for a week, and I'll reduce my stress. But is that the correct dose that I need? Do I need 6 minutes or 9 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour per day? How frequent do the sessions need to be? So a lot of these things, like how does the practice need to be configured for me to get the benefit? And we don't know anything about the context, so we don't know the placebo effects. We don't know the context effects, so we don't know. If I'm sitting down at a meditation retreat and there's a group of people around me and they're all dressed in orange robes and sitting on rugs and or sitting on mats and there's a gong and incense burning, and there's a really experienced teacher who's telling me what to do and guiding me through the practice. Is the effect going to be the same as if I listen to a recording of that sitting at home or on the train? If I had a 3 minute version of that rather than a 1 hour version, would that be different? So yeah, the stuff that we're doing now is really trying to understand. Okay, well, if these things do work, we don't know that they do yet, but if they do, what are the key components that are needed for them to work? You know, how much do people expect they're going to work? Um, what contextual cues are present, what are absent, and how do they explain the effects, and how does that differ from the specific effect? So that's the stuff we're really getting interested in now.
Well, it's great you actually bring that up because trying to think about our modern world and as more and more things like they go online and you're doing things through apps, it's appreciating the placebo effect. It's not obvious that you can translate something to an experience where they're doing it by themselves and the setting and everything about it is completely different, right? And it's a kind of an interesting test as to what degree can you're trying to mediate an effect by like a specific thing and there's again but it's more complicated than that because you don't know what they're doing now with the app and there's also fluctuations and changes between different apps and so now you're not really able to monitor exactly how people are using it and in what circumstances, so you have all these interesting questions that you kind of yeah.
That's right. And going back to the ethics side of this, so if it were shown that meditation apps were nothing but placebo, there would be an ethical obligation for the providers of those apps to be upfront that there's no specific effect of their product, right? So people are paying for these products, which they're led to believe will lead to benefits, and they may not actually be doing. They may be leading to benefits, but they may not be doing it through the mechanisms that they've been promised. So there's a lot of kind of ethical issues around that, regulatory issues, and the incentives at the moment. Um, it's a booming business. It's very lucrative to get into the meditation apps industry, and the incentives aren't there yet for regulation and safety and monitoring and all that sort of stuff. So these are some of the things we're looking at as well.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you bring that sort of into contextualize all that we talked about. Is there any? I can put links to your work and things in the description. But anything else you'd like to say about where people can find you?
Yeah, look, you can find me. Researchers these days have a fairly hefty digital footprint, but you can find me at the Contemplative Studies Centre at the University of Melbourne. We can put a link up for that. And yeah, Google Scholar, you'll find me there as well.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Jack.
Thank you.